Remember when Jake said he was ready, and now all of a sudden he said 1 second?
Because he just poured Makers, the opposite of craft. A podcast about bourbon and the ones who drink it. This is Bourbon Matters. Welcome to Bourbon Matters. I'm Jake.
I'm Dan.
I'm Gold Eagle Jake.
And tonight we are talking about craft distilleries, which Dan told us not to look up the definition of because it seems like it's probably something hilarious.
Well, so there's really not in terms of the government side, there's really not a definition for craft. So if there is from the American Distiller or American Craft Spirits Association have kind of their own rules for what makes a distillery craft. But when you guys think of craft distilleries, what do you think of? Like, if you're going to call something craft, why are you calling it a craft distillery?
My guess would have been some sort of output limit of like how much distillate you're producing, but something tells me that's probably not the criteria they're using.
It's part of it. There's part of it. I'll give you that.
Yeah, my guess would be like under a certain amount of barrels or, liters distilled per year. But I mean, that's a good point. And I'm glad you told us not to look it up because I probably would have. And I think everyone's opinion on craft distilleries is, different and just kind of their own, what they associate with it. So
what about, besides the output, what are some other associations that you guys think of when you think of a craft distillery?
So I think this should be kind of obvious, but I don't know if everybody would consider it, but I feel like they have to actually distill their own liquor.
It's a distillery.
Well, I mean,
congratulations,
because there's small brands
Dan,
that source.
Yeah,
there's small brands that source, and people might not realize that they're sourcing, and they call themselves craft brands, or that they make craft whiskey, or they sell craft whiskey.
True, because if the law was only distilling volume, then there are very small. There are probably big brands that source 99% and just distill a tiny bit, just kind of for fun, or to say that they're actually distilling.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm actually very interested to learn what the official definition is of craft whiskey.
And again, this is official from American Craft Spirits Association. It's not a government thing. But when I talk about it, when I read it, it started to make me realize that it's very similar to when you think of a craft brewery as well. So the first rule, which I think is kind of dumb, but I understand what they're getting at. A distillery who values the importance of transparency in distilling remains forthcoming regarding their use of ingredients, their distilling location process, bottling locations process, and aging process.
Okay.
I mean, basically, it's like, they got to care and be transparent about it, which most people are in distilling because they enjoy it. But
it's pretty vague, but
pretty vague.
Very vague.
I'm going to skip over the second one now. The third one, which I agree with wholeheartedly, a distillery that directly or indirectly holds an ownership interest of 51% or more of the DSP.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have investors in, but you still have to have
self-ownership
of it.
That's very, very interesting, and I do agree with that. That's very cool. And I think the majority of people don't know about that.
Yeah. No, that's nice that's in. That's probably the one I like the most. The third, technically the second rule, the one I would save for last. A distillery that produces fewer than, any guesses?
1 million gallons.
750,000 gallons annually.
That's so much.
You were pretty close for a wild guess there.
If you're talking again, this is American Craft Spirits Association, because at first I was wondering if it's proof gallons, but it's total gallons. And 750,000 is if you're talking whiskey, about 14,150 barrels a year.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
it's a little over 1,000 barrels a month. You can still consider yourself craft.
My guess would have been like 1 barrel a day, 365 barrels a year, which would have been 20,000 gallons compared to the 750,000 gallons that's written in there.
That would put a lot of distilleries under the craft umbrella.
Until a few years ago, Bardstown still called themselves a craft distiller.
Right. That has to qualify, like, just looking over my shoulder, like Old Elk has to be considered a craft distillery then, even though they're available nationwide.
I don't know. Are they... Wait, so the rule was distilling, right? Does it...
The transparency in distilling remains forthcoming regarding their use of ingredients, distilling location, process, bottling locations, process, and aging process.
I'm talking about the volume. That's 100% they're distilled.
It is now.
Or is it just
when
whiskey?
They first started? Because they wouldn't be able to.
Because going back to the sourcing thing.
Yeah.
Like
it doesn't say anything about sourcing.
I'd find it hard to believe that Old Elk falls in there, including all of their sourced barrels they got from MGP.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I don't know.
That's fair.
I don't know what Old Elk is doing behind the scenes in terms of distilling. I would imagine that they're just cranking, even though they don't have a lot, released of their own distillate. They got to be cranking, getting stuff ready.
Was it an 8-year is supposed to come out this year?
They just came out with an 8-year wheated bourbon. Oh, I don't know about it being their own, but they just came out with an 8-year wheated bourbon and then a 10-year wheat whiskey. But those are MGP, if I'm not mistaken. But I know they transferred all of their MGP barrels to Colorado.
Yeah, that's right.
And I just, with the success that they're having and Greg Metz behind it and how big that name has gotten, I would find it hard to believe that they're distilling under that amount, but I could be totally off.
Yeah, maybe that was a bad example.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know. We're just spitballing here.
What else do I have back here? I
think Peerless falls in that.
Oh yeah,
Peerless does.
Peerless would.
Yeah,
I was gonna say Bardstown, but they're making a shitload of whiskey, so they don't qualify.
Yep.
They're owned by the Pritzkers now.
Yep. We're aware.
So they don't fall under that 51% ownership.
When you're owned by a politician, you don't fall under any laws, Jake. It's just I guess when I always thought of craft. Well, so when I saw the amount that you were allowed to produce, I immediately thought of Sam Adams still being called a craft brewery.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up because I find that unbelievably hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think of craft distillers, I'll let you guys answer before I threw my stuff in. I always thought more regional. Like if you're in the Midwest, whenever I think of craft breweries, I think of New Glarus and not Sam Adams.
Right.
I think a small regional, you have more of a local hometown following within a few state areas. But yeah, that's more or less what I thought. But yeah, apparently you can do 1,000 some barrels a month and still be considered craft. So
it's crazy.
They don't shoehorn many. They don't shoehorn a lot of small companies in there. They let some big guys in here too. So
yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of the interesting thing. But I think it was last week, Jake, you were kind of talking about some things, Gold Eagle Jake, with the way some of the big distilling is going now, and you don't have much of that hand-on touch. And I think when I think of craft distilleries, we're Whiskey Acres, we're very hands-on. There's not much automation, so everything's still done a lot by hand. Now there's a lot of distilleries that are same size as us or bigger that are kind of more automated, but still have a lot of hands-on stuff. But I tend to think more of the hands-on when I think of a craft. But
yeah, I would have thought it would have been more based on volume. I do really like the law about the ownership. That's super cool to throw in there. But I kind of think of this as also compared to a lot of the liquor laws, and just they're so old school, just written right after prohibition ended. Nothing has changed. They keep them the way they are purely because that's how they were written, and they just don't want to change anything. I think in the next like 10 years, we'll start to see some more changes now that alcohol is becoming a um, more, I guess, accepted, or like kind of more looked at as a hobby instead of just a way to get a buzz on. And I think that the craft distilling law will kind of change as that goes. But I don't know. Does it say when that was written? I'm
There's
sure it
no.
was. I'm sure it was more recently. It's not like
Yeah, it's
craft
definitely since,
was a
because I'm not
thing
sure how
during
long American.
Prohibition. But I just
Um,
want to use that as like an example. Like once they set these laws in the liquor world, it takes a lot of work to get anything changed, and 99.99% of the time, nothing gets changed.
Well, especially because
So
it's like a lot of these aren't even at the federal level; they're at the state level,
yeah,
and like trying to get all 50 states to agree on something is like damn near
right,
impossible.
right. Hmm.
so the American Craft Spirits Association is only 10 years old, 2013 to 2023 currently. So
Yeah, that makes
um,
sense.
that's not a very old. It almost feels, when I was reading the first stipulation they have about the importance of transparency and this, listen off this and this and this and this. It's like they're just like pointing right at Buffalo Trace. Like, yeah, Buffalo Trace, you can't be in it because of this. We're ruling you out on step one.
Hmm.
But um, no, craft distilleries, obviously a lot have popped up over the last decade or a little more. Same way craft breweries started about 20 years ago, popping up everywhere. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and again, like you hear the name craft brewery, you think of that little brew pub that brews their own beer in the back. That's what normally goes through my mind when I think of craft breweries. But I mean, you see a lot of that with craft distilleries too, is these small little places that make their own. They sell a little bit, but some of them are just making enough to keep the bar full for them.
Yep.
But
Yeah, I'm still gonna have my own opinion as what is a craft and what is not a craft. I'm not gonna go off of that
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
law.
Well, like yeah. So like let's talk about what our criteria would be.
So I personally, I dig that first law with the, you have to have majority ownership. That's something I wouldn't have thought of, but I think it's a really good addition. And then
mm-hmm.
the other thing to me would be just how much they're producing. And I would think like, 5 barrels a day is like more than enough to be not a craft distillery.
Yeah,
Um, like Union Horse, for example, in Kansas, their claim to fame is they make 1 barrel a day. That's it. And I don't know, like they would be in my head a borderline craft distillery because they are. I don't know if they're in all 50 states, but they have pretty wide distribution, and it's a pretty big distillery. But yeah, I don't know. My criteria I think would be like much much smaller in terms of how much volume that distillery is producing.
yeah. I would probably go a little bit higher than 1 barrel a day. Um, I would probably say no more than 500 barrels in a year would be what my thought would be.
Yeah, I'd say probably around there.
Um, just because if you are trying to do some it's that thing. I mean, since obviously the name of craft distiller isn't necessarily a big thing to be marketing because there's really no. I mean, it took me a little bit to find the definition. I had to go through a couple of websites to find an actual definition, and it's from an organization that's been around for a decade. So,
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with small batch. Like small batch doesn't
Right.
actually mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just some like marketing term that's usually
Yeah,
applied.
that's a good point.
Like I think it's somebody said I might be wrong, but I think it's Jefferson's. Says that they're small batch, but they're using like over 1,000 barrels per batch. So like, when you hear small batch, you think maybe like 5 barrels.
Mm-hmm.
But like a lot of these brands are just using small batch as a marketing
And it's
term.
also, small batch is very up to the distillery to decide. Depending on the size of your distillery, is what you're going to call a small batch. Like maybe for Jefferson's, well, I don't know. Jefferson's doesn't really have like a bottom shelfer. Like Four Roses is the best example for small batch because they have a straight bourbon bottom shelfer, then they have the small batch, and then they have single barrel, and then they work up the small batch select, which I'm pretty sure is just like 5 barrels blended together. And So Jefferson's doesn't really they don't have like a straight bourbon. So all of their products are small batch. You know, I didn't know they were using 1,000 barrels. Like that's a lot. That's they should just be calling that a straight bourbon. But they're gaining a lot of customers because they put small batch on the label, and there's no law for small batch. People just kind of assume like, oh, it's a smaller collection of barrels. It was crafted together. It must be better than just a straight bourbon.
Well, I guess it makes sense because let's say Buffalo Trace normally does a 5,000 barrel blend, and then all of a sudden they do one that's only 2,000 barrel blend. Well, that's a lot smaller batch than their normal.
Right.
It's all.
Yeah, so that's why it kind of depends on the size of the distillery originally.
Yeah. So like going back to the criteria for this, I do like the transparency aspect of it. And like I've said this a lot on the show that I really do prefer brands that are transparent. But I think you should be afforded the luxury of keeping your recipe secret if you so choose, especially if you're a small distillery.
There's kind of there's a fine line between being transparent, giving away too much information, and giving away false information. Like I don't think no whiskey drinker is going to appreciate false information.
Right.
So I think with that, as long as you're being truthful with all the information that you are giving, I don't mind if you hide your mash bill because I get it. You want to have something that's yours, and you don't want people to be able to replicate it. Even though we all know you can't really replicate a whiskey. It's done a certain way, and most of the oak and the aging does its talking. But I don't know. I think just going back to the craft thing, I've just heard from so many people, say, "Oh, I don't like craft whiskey," and I think most of those people they don't know what the definition of craft whiskey is. I didn't, so I'm not saying like you should or most people do know. But I just think when people think of craft whiskey, they think of that local distillery that is barely producing enough to have a product out there. But if we're using the true definition of craft whiskey, you can't really say I don't like craft whiskey because there's probably like 95% of the distilleries out there are considered craft whiskey.
Yeah, to say besides your Jim, your Jack, your Buffalo, your Heaven Hills, like your main
makers,
ones.
Yeah.
You're almost. This really only rules out probably like when you think about a lot of things you drink. This probably really rules out like 24 distilleries.
It rules out the big six, and then the distilleries that are bought or have investors.
Yeah.
So
it's and I can understand, especially people say that they don't like craft. It's usually because the big advantage of being these big distilleries that have been around forever is it takes a long time to get everything tuned into the exact way that you want it. When you're waiting 4 to 5 years to taste something that you made and then make a change to it,
right,
and try it again and try it again and try it again. So it takes time to get better and better and better. So obviously, as a craft distillery, you want to start off selling something or a newer distillery, you want to start off selling something that people can like and enjoy and not be offended by. But obviously, the goal is to keep on checking back and seeing how it changes because it's going to change. And usually you keep getting better and better and better.
Yeah, but, I think like also it's there is a little bit of like a taste or flavor component to it. Now, like you can identify certain distilleries by their flavor profiles. However, I would challenge somebody to be able to tell if it's a craft distillery versus a large distillery.
So, I mean, that brings up a good point too. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've poured something for someone, or someone, is just drinking something blind, and they go, "Oh, this smells crafty," or "This tastes crafty."
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah, like that's a very common thing. And I guarantee 99% of those people don't know what craft distilling is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like just like this doesn't taste like Heaven Hill or Jim Beam or Buffalo Trace to me, so it must not be,
Mm-hmm.
It must be some guy in his basement.
Yeah, I don't know. There's it's kind of like there's not really a fine line, It's mostly opinionated on what you think is craft or what you think tastes like craft. But yeah, it's a interesting subject. I kind of like this is. I was just gonna say this is one time where like I really wish the listeners would be able to speak in and give their feedback on this, because I'm kind of torn in a couple different places about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
Jake, I'm offended that you said basement distillers and not garage distillers. But the other thing I was thinking of today too, besides just the fact that it takes a while for a newer distillery or these small craft distilleries to really figure out everything that they want to do the way they want to do it, the other side of things is like when we think of craft, if we're going to think of, we're saying we normally think of smaller or newer things, especially newer things that have started up. Where did master distillers from a new distillery come from? They're not coming from people that have had years and years experience doing it, because they're not going to make enough money distilling at a very small startup.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're going to be a big startup, usually you're going to have some investment behind you, and then you might not be owning 51%, still be considered a craft distillery. But I mean, just think of, what was it, Woodford? When Elizabeth McCall took over not too long ago. She'd been the assistant there for 10 years.
Yeah.
So for 10 years, you're basically doing all the grunt work and doing everything the way they want you to. Like it's you, if you're starting up small, you're figuring out things as you go.
Which was starting to sound like a little personal grievance there, Dan.
A little bit.
Dan,
but no,
Dan's a little shook, for those of you not watching the video.
No. I mean the funny thing was, it's any small distillery is not going to have the cash to get a big name person. Now,
right? Yeah.
Like at Whiskey Acres, they had a distiller, or they got taught by Dave Pickerel, which most people can't really have that claim to fame. Then they had a master distiller for a little bit, and then Rob came in with really no experience at all, and was taking online classes through a place in Scotland, and got his degree in fermentation science as he was learning things. He's been there for 7 years now, but that's what you're going to get when you start off. I mean, when Torvig was in, they brought in a master distiller that didn't work, and they put out an ad for people that didn't have experience.
Yep.
And they said the same thing too. It takes time for you to figure out what you're doing. I mean, I walked into a situation where I knew the very, very basics of distilling, and that was about it, from making lawnmower fuel as a try. So I had very base knowledge, but the amount I learned quickly has been insane. But I'm making whiskey for a decent sized distillery now, and came in with no experience, but it just takes some time to build up and get exactly where you want to be with your cuts and everything.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on it, and then we talked about it last episode too, that, most distillers, it takes, decades to perfect whatever your spirit is. And by that time, it might be close to retirement.
Mm-hmm.
That's like we've talked about this point before too, is that the big advantage that Buffalo Trace and Heaven Hill and Four Roses and these other distilleries that have been around since the 1800s have is that they've got over 100 years of experience and recipe fine tuning. That
An inventory of barrels.
Right, and inventory that most other distilleries just don't have. Definitely don't have the luxury, to be able to dump entire crops of certain things if they feel like it's not up to their standards or whatever, or do massive experimental batches and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, what are some of the craft things you guys are drinking tonight?
Makers. I'm just kidding.
It doesn't have to be craft. We were just talking about the difference between craft and other distilleries.
No, yeah. I mean, you guys hopped on the podcast. I didn't even know what we were talking about tonight. That's how you guys know we do it all on the fly. We don't plan these episodes out. But as I was pouring some of my private select makers, they're like, we were talking about craft distilleries tonight. I'm like, oh, better go grab some different bottles. So I went back and I grabbed Peerless because technically they're considered a craft distillery. So this would be like my kind of extreme, like best of the best. I'd have to look at a whole list to really narrow it down, but off the top of my head, that the Peerless would be like the best of the best craft distillery that I've tasted. And my other bottle, I had to support Dan over here, is Whiskey Acres Gold Eagle store pick, supporting both of us. But yeah,
still available.
Really, really good barrel. I think this particular barrel just shows what Whiskey Acres is capable of, and it's what I believe Whiskey Acres will get to in just a year or two once more stuff matures. And they really, all their barrels that they've been fine tuning come to age.
Yeah, and that's a good point. If you make it out there, try whatever the what do they call it, Dan? The
Distillers Reserve.
Reserve. Yeah, so the employees pick a barrel on a rotating schedule, and that's usually available for pours at the bar. They're usually really good. So definitely give that a try if you're out there.
One of the questions I get asked by a bunch of friends when they see that, they're like, when are you picking a barrel? I'm like, right. I honestly don't want to, because on the bottom sticker of the bottle, you have the person who picked it, and you have to sign or put your name or put your initials on every single one of those stickers. So that's like 180 stickers. I ain't signing 180 stickers. That's too much work.
What else are you going to do while you're waiting for shit to distill?
Yeah.
I got plenty of stuff to do.
Like drink.
Have you heard of this thing called YouTube?
Have you heard of this thing called a Glencairn?
Yeah.
Yeah, we hold hands the entire day, and it's a rough job, but
somebody's got to do it, Jake. Yeah. When you're out there doing barrel picks all the time, just think of me suffering in a distillery.
I know,
with nothing to do when I'm.
It's a rough
parched. I am drinking a fairly local small craft distillery, Mississippi River Distilling Company out of the Quad Cities. I've never had their stuff. This is the first time I had it. I have some of my relatives live in the Quad Cities, and they brought me a Cody Road single barrel, which I think it's actually, when I looked it up, LeClaire, Iowa, which isn't that where the American Pickers were from or something, isn't it? Right in that area.
Oh, somewhere. Yeah, I think it is.
But it's just right over the Mississippi from us. They're not a farm distillery like Whiskey Acres, but it says on their website they get all their grain from within 25 miles of their distillery. So this is...
rye or bourbon?
This is a single barrel bourbon.
What's the proof? 90?
No, this is barrel proof.
Is it?
I think so. Maybe not. No, 105 proof.
105.
Batch 1, bottle 110. And it is a 70% corn, 20% wheat, 10% barley. It does have a pretty good nose on it. It's got a little bit of that, not saying this in a bad way, it's got a little bit of the dusty corn nose on it. But then a lot of caramel and vanilla on the back. The finish makes me feel like it finishes a little stronger than 105 proof. It does have a little bit of the ethanol in the finish on it. Palate's decent. It's not bad. I should have brought some water because this drop or two of water might have really opened this up as well too. But I think it's I think, and I mean, there are people say this about Whiskey Acres too, and it's not a bad thing. Is it kind of has a little bit more of that corn note onto it yet?
Just say Crafty. You know you want to say
it tastes crafty. This if I did this blind, I would probably be able to tell that it was a craft distillery that did this, Jake. No, it's good. I have no problems with this. I'll definitely. It's not a bottle that I'm not happy about. It's not one of my favorite bottles, but I think this is a good start because this is batch 1, so this is the first time they've released their single barrel. And the bottle I don't think is too terribly old, so definitely a good foundation to keep building on.
So I'll just give my quick take on this distillery. I'm actually a pretty big fan. We had one of their owners out for a master class last year, and they're all about kind of like being your first whiskey, your intro to getting into sipping whiskey neat. Anytime I talk to somebody who, says they had, old fashioned, or they went to a friend's house and people were sipping whiskey and they kind of want to get into it. Cody Road from Mississippi River is a perfect first example because their target market is the beginner into whiskey. Everything they do is lower proof. They try to, with their mash bill, 70 corn, 20% wheat, 10 barley. They try to make a really approachable, softer whiskey. And I think that 105 proof, it might not be barrel proof, but I think it's pretty close to it because I'm pretty sure they have a very low entry proof. And I know they do everything in like 15 or 35 gallon barrels, so smaller barrels. And they're also all about like mastering flavored whiskeys.
Yeah, they do a lot of flavored.
Yeah, I know we're not big flavored whiskey fans, but like if you want a good honey whiskey, if you want a good maple whiskey, they're using really, really good honey and really, really good local maple syrup and blending it perfectly into the whiskey. And their price point is right. Like I'm sure that single barrel bottle was under $40.
Yeah, I know it was
because
their prices are pretty low.
All their stuff is usually around $30 a bottle, and some of the single barrels can get up to around 40. But for the price, I think they're great. They're just not like a connoisseur's whiskey, but they're really good to have around in case you need a decent mixer or in case you have guests over who aren't really into whiskey at the level that we are, and want to kind of dabble and try something.
And the other thing I think of when I think of craft distilleries, I guess none of us really talked about this, is when I think of craft distilleries, it's a place I want to go to on the weekend and have a few drinks out at their place because they're usually very fun, very relaxed environments, very, very chill and very fun places to be at. I mean, it's not that the big distilleries aren't fun to be at, but
they don't need to entertain.
Right.
They're making all their money from their whiskey. The smaller, craftier distilleries, they need people to come to the tap room and buy cocktails and, buy food if they have food. That's really how they're making money because they're only distilling so much, and then it's very hard to be a startup distillery if you're just making whiskey because obviously you need to let the stuff age and it takes time.
Yeah.
I do want to try. They do have a corn whiskey that they sell, and it's called Iowa-ish whiskey. And I just want to try it because that looks awesome.
They have a bourbon cream called like Iowish. That's really good.
Nice.
Yeah, their creams and flavors are the best.
Yeah, it looks like they have the honey, a maple, a peach, an old fashioned, a barrel Manhattan. So yeah, I don't know too much about them. I've seen this stuff around, and like I said, I got this bottle given to me, and was hadn't had a reason to open it. And I thought this would be a good
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to pull this one out. But
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah,
nice.
no,
It's
it's a good
nice.
idea. Mm-hmm. Mr. Jake?
So yeah, for me, I'm drinking Blonde Brothers. Drinking the rye whiskey tonight because that's the one that I had open. And it's actually it's probably one of my favorite ryes. It's 100% rye at 100 proof. For those that don't know, they're in Galena. I'm like very upset because the one time I've ever been to Galena, I was told that they weren't very good, so I didn't stop there. And somebody told me a brutal lie
Who told you
because it is
that?
very good. I cannot remember for the life of me. But yeah, I'm like upset that I never stopped there because uh,
I
I
mean, to
had the
be
opportunity
fair,
to, and I passed it up. So
yeah, I was gonna say, to be fair, their stuff has gotten a lot better in the last couple of years. Shout out to Matt and Mike. I mean, they're doing things right. They're taking their time.
mm-hmm.
They're not rushing barrels out of there. They have a good stock of like 8 or 9 year old stuff that they're still just sitting on because they care and they want it to be, they want to love it before they put it out there. They don't just want to release something just to get their money back on it. They want to absolutely love it and build their name slowly. So I got a
Mm-hmm.
lot of respect for those
Is
guys.
I think this rye is even like a 5 year like standard. It's not. It doesn't have
Is
an
that
age
the
statement.
is that the standard off the shelf?
Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
it's like
Yeah, I
four or
mean, I
five
think
year rye, which is
it
pretty
is,
old for
but
a
they also, I
craft
think it's
distillery
like
rye.
up to 7 years probably in that bottle.
Yeah,
I think like their straight off the shelf stuff is a
I
blend of
mean
like 4 to 7
it's
year.
it's dark too. Like
Hmm.
you can tell that it's got some age on it. It definitely comes through in the nose and on the palate. Um, it's a for being 100% rye. It's not really that like MGP kind of flavor.
Hmm.
It's almost bourbony in its flavor profile rather than a rye.
Wait, did you say it is MGP like?
It's not really.
Oh yeah.
It's a
It's
lot
not
more
a,
like vanilla and
it's
caramel. There's like a
it,
little bit of like baking spice, like
hmm
cinnamon,
it is
and
distilled by Blum.
yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just want to be clear with our
yeah. No,
listeners out
the
there.
only thing that they don't distill, they don't make anymore or sell anymore because they
Yeah, the
ran
old
out.
Fango. Well,
Not a bourbon.
they came
Yeah,
out with like a
Nodder
Nodder
bourbon.
Rye recently,
Oh, did
but
they?
yeah,
Okay.
they will always be very transparent. Yeah, I think it was like a
Yeah.
distillery only release like 6 months ago, but it was called Nodder Rye. But yeah, they're very transparent. They're not gonna try and pull one on us.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, their stuff has improved drastically. They're finally starting to do some single barrels and some really unique finishes that I think is just kind of the missing piece of the puzzle that they needed.
Yeah, and the master class was that last year or early this year?
It was early this year.
We tried a few different rides from them that were all phenomenal. Um, and then do you have a barrel pick coming?
No, we haven't done one.
Okay.
But I mean, we probably will soon. Hopefully, Matt and Mike are listening to this and will offer us one up. But I've got a pretty good relationship with them, and they actually just parted ways with their distributor. So right at the
Oh,
moment,
okay.
right now, they don't have a distributor. I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying this, but I said it. So hopefully soon they'll partner up with another distributor and we'll be able to do more with them. But I know if we like found a single barrel that we really wanted, they would find a way to get it to us. So not really too concerned about that. But yeah, Blom is they're trying to make moves. They're trying to get more notice, and props to them because those guys are working hard and they both have families, and I think they're producing some really good whiskey. And I think in the early stages, kind of like Whiskey Acres, they might have I should say with any like small craft distillery, like it just takes time, and you're not going to come out with your best stuff on your first try. You're not going to come out with your best stuff on your second, third, or fourth try. It's going to take years of practice and trial and error to really dial in what you're doing.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's not just learning how to do everything too, but it's also learning how to get the best out of your equipment. It's
and like how your equipment's going to affect what it tastes like 6 years from now,
and how coming out of the still at 2 proof points higher or 2 proof points lower after it's been cut down and into a barrel for a little bit, is there much of a difference? And sometimes the answer is yes. We know that we want to be about 138 to 140 proof coming out of our still, is where we're putting a lot of our whiskey at. So, but it took them a long time to figure that out, that's where we're getting the flavor profile that we want is out of that range. And it just takes some time to learn that.
Dan's just giving away trade secrets over here.
Right.
Well, I guess Jake is too.
If you want, if you came down for the tour, we say that on the tour. So don't know if it's a really big secret when it's part of our tour. So, but no, it's fun. It's fun to watch stuff grow. I just wish Blom wasn't in Galena because I'm not a big fan of Galena. It goes back to old high school rivalries and such. But
high school? What high schools are out by Galena?
First of all, Galena is one of the big high schools out by us.
Yeah. Because there's no one else out there.
You forget that Dan was a farm boy.
Yeah. You have Lena right there. Lena, Stockton, you drive Elizabeth. Elizabeth doesn't have high school. They're part of. I forget who they're part of now.
Yeah,
but no, there's a bunch of small schools out there. I can take you out there and show you guys some bars if you want to see some bars.
Yeah, I went out to Galena for the first time when we picked our last 2 Blonde barrels. Well, first time since I was like 10 years old. I wouldn't mind going out there again. Like, it was actually surprisingly, for going out in the middle of nowhere, it was a decently interesting drive. And you gotta love just the factor, just being in a small town. It's a good little escape.
I do want to go there to get out to Blonde Brothers because
we should go.
I'm better that I did not go last time.
Yeah,
even if someone told me a place's whiskey sucked and I was going there out to that area, I would still stop, check it out, and get a cocktail. Come on.
Well, we were on our way home, and it was either stop at this place that somebody told me was garbage or just go home after a wedding.
I got
you. So I was like, I'm just going to go home.
Yeah.
Nice. Any other thoughts on craft distilleries or other things that you're thinking of? Hold on. This wouldn't be craft, but when Jake, you were talking about Four Roses, that did bring me back to my newsfeed today. Did you see the new Four Roses is going to be releasing here soon? And Illinois will be getting some.
I just saw that they were coming out with new labels.
They are coming out with a sampler pack that will have 10 different 50 milliliter bottles of like the OESK, OBS, like a bunch of their different things. I think it was like $130 is what the retail was going to be on it. It said you can get them at the gift shop, and then it listed 6 states that they'll be selling them. Illinois is one.
Genius idea.
Great idea, because that's the one thing is I wasn't a big fan of the tour at Four Roses that we went on.
Well, the plant was shut down, which still blows me away. I can't believe that they shut down for a month out of every year. But
yeah, and to be fair, I think I was really hammered by the time we were there. But Really hammered's probably an understatement. I don't know. I thought their tasting was kind of meh, but because they spend all this time talking about, this mash, this letter is for this mash bill, and this is for this style of yeast, and then they give you like these small ass tiny samples, and that was about it. I wish they would have gave us some different flavor profiles to try. But this is really cool. I'm really excited for it. I'm not probably going to see one or get one, but I'm sure they're going to be in very high demand. But
I do know they're pretty strict on how much they can pour. A lot of depending on what part of Kentucky you're in, they have pretty strict laws still, believe it or not. But no, I do remember after my tour, which was like, of course, a VIP private tour. It was still like 4 quarter-ounce samples, and it was like, okay, that was cool, but I couldn't really taste too much. But I haven't even heard about that pack yet, but that is genius, and I hope more distilleries do things like this because the consumer really is about, they're 100 times more advanced than what they were 10 years ago. And people can pick up these differences in these different recipes, and they're also more into sipping whiskey at home, so that 10 sampler pack can make for a really, really fun evening with 2 or 3 guys, 3, 4 guys, girls, whatever, at home. I'd rather spend $130 on that than go out and spend $130 on 6 or 7 shitty cocktails.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I saw it and I'm like, this is awesome. This is a great idea. Then I'm like, shit, this is going to be the next thing that everyone's walking into. And hey, did you get the Four Roses box set in? Got any 4 Roses box sets in the back, Jake?
I'm going to start getting requests every single day now after this episode airs. So, which surprisingly, I actually had a few people come in and ask about the Buffalo Trace when it was dropping before it dropped, just because they listened to the Bourbon Matters. So I thought that was pretty cool.
See,
so
if you listen, you get insider info.
I'm totally up for giving listeners insider info. I think it's cool that we have a small but decent following of people that listen to us speak and drink. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool next week when that Pappy 12 barrel comes.
Yeah.
I like how we've resorted to bribing people to listen to go into Jake's store and buy shit.
All right, every week from
Jesus
now on,
Christ.
every week from now on, we're going to tell you what day something is dropping. But yeah, well, same reason why I couldn't give an exact date on the Buffalo Trace is like, we don't know when this stuff drops until it shows up at our door, and then it's like, all right, here we go. Time to drop it. But yeah.
No, so that'll be cool. I'm not the biggest fan of Four Roses, but I think that's a great idea. Was a year and a half or 2 years ago when Bardstown started doing their little sampler packs with their distillate.
Those were cool too, yeah.
It was cool. I mean, that sampler pack was basically what you do to their tasting when we were there for the tour. Was they started with the distillate, which I like. I think that's cool. So you can see how much the barrel changes something. I know there's a couple other places I've seen. I know Laws has like a small box with a couple different things in it, but I like those people that are doing those smaller things because we like to try, and it's a good way to try and get people to find stuff. Now you're going to find things in there that you're not a big fan of, but then you're going to find something in there you didn't know you liked, and you can go right after it then.
Yeah, and exactly. People want to try; they want to explore. And same thing I say at the end of the master classes. You just tried 6 things. You're gonna find something that you really love. So more distilleries should be doing that. I hope we get to the point where big distilleries are listening to our podcast and they take these things into advice. But we will just put it on record and say we're before the trend.
You say that, Jake, until Buffalo Trace makes one that's got Eagle Rare, Taylor, Blanton's, and everyone's. Do you have the Buffalo Trace? Still,
that would be a genius idea. Like genius, because they probably could get it out to more people.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's going to be looking for it. And, you know, I'll tell, like, if you guys were to ask me for that, I'd tell you you're stupid. Like, you've tasted all that stuff. Why would you want to overpay for a 50 milliliter sampler pack? But nobody's tasted all the Four Roses recipes unless you've gone there to do a barrel pick.
Yeah.
Right.
And even then, the barrels are going to be different based on what single barrel they're pulling. So I think that's absolutely genius. And even if they do make a ton of it, I can't see it sitting on the shelf for long anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because that's like, because there's 10 different recipes, and I would say most of those you can't get outside of one of the blended batches.
No, you really can't. I think only one of them you can get off the shelf, which is the one that's in their straight single barrel, the hunter proof version. But then to get the other recipes on their own, you have to find a barrel pick.
Yep.
So,
well, that was a fun little quick topic to talk about. Unexpected.
Yeah, way to end the craft episode on a major story, Dan.
Nice. All right. Well, we know that the Gold Eagle Buffalo Trace barrel pick hit the app today, but it also sold out on the app today very quickly. But
sold out in store too. I think I got the text during this podcast that the barrel sold out.
I will say that it's nice to have the app, because when I went to sign in, I'm like, shit, I'm not going to get one. And it had all my information. I could just hit the click.
Yeah.
And, it was nice. It was nice. And then it was funny because I just had to do that. And Rob, our master distiller, was trying to get one, and he's freaking out as he's frantically trying to enter his credit card and his address and all this stuff. I'm like, that's what you get. That's what you get, Rob. Should have had an account.
That's what you get for not supporting us before, Rob.
I've tried as hard as I can with him. Sometimes.
See, Dan talks all this shit about promoting Gold Eagle all the time, and what does he do? He gives it like a 3-minute plug.
He's a good promoter.
All on his own.
He's a good promoter.
You act like I don't give everything shit about everything. Like that's my personality.
And here's the thing. Even if you give something shit, you're still promoting it.
I know.
So.
No, I people that know me realize that all I do is talk stupid shit because it makes me laugh.
That's why you're on the podcast, Dan.
And for those of you listening, do understand that after one episode, I texted Jake, right? I'm like, you realize that I was just joking about that, right? Jake from Gold Eagle and me, we know each other pretty well, but we're not besties by any means. I'm like, does he realize that that's my personality, that I'm just giving him shit? So I let me make sure I cleared it up.
Yeah.
I'm an asshole. It's fine. Jake,
unfortunately, that's the only reason you're on the show still. So
I know.
Yeah,
I'm here for the humor and the quick little 30-second Instagram clips.
Yeah, well, I'll plug Gold Eagle.
I say one dumb thing per episode, and it seems to always I say multiple dumb things per episode. Let's be honest, but.
So I'll plug Gold Eagle real quick. Instagram,
yeah, go plug
Gold Eagle Wine, Facebook, Gold Eagle Spirits. Make sure you download our app and make sure you buy something so that when we drop something that's selling out quick, you don't have to go and put in all your information. It'll all be saved in there. So then one click of the button, you can just secure it, come and pick it up at your leisure, and that's that. And I don't know if we have anything dropping next week. If we get something delivered, we'll drop it.
So no, nothing for the listeners to take home this week.
I don't know. Yeah, nothing that I know of. It's actually pretty rare that we know when something is coming. Most of the time, it's a day before, 2 days before, or it just shows up at the back door, and then that's that. But what I can say is there's plenty of great stuff out there on the shelf. If you miss a drop, just come in, see us, and you'll find something that you will like. I guarantee that.
Jake, plug our shit. I'm done.
My final thought on craft distilleries: go to a local one and try it, even if it's just for fun. because you never know what you'll stumble on. So just Google like bourbon distillery or whiskey distillery near me, and go check out whatever's close.
And even if it's not good, you're supporting a local place that cares.
Yeah.
Rule number 1 of craft distillery: remember, they care.
Yep. So you can find us at Bourbon Matters on Instagram and Facebook. You can watch us on Spotify and YouTube, or listen to anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Like, subscribe, rate, comment, tell us that we're all idiots because we don't know what craft whiskey is.
Feel free to single
Whatever
me out.
you want.
Like, I'm fine being singled out too. Like the one that's not named Jake.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Cool.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.